Hello, everyone, and welcome aboard to episode 150 of To The Point podcast. Everybody's doing well after a beautiful weekend here in New Brunswick. Finally, getting some some good weather on the weekends, which has just been a rarity so far in the summer. But hopefully, everybody got to enjoy it. And this weekend was also jam packed. Obviously, not with the normal sports that we cover here on a day-to-day basis. On To The Point, hockey is now in the ether. It's on the back burner for a little bit, although we do have the expansion draft next week, which I do hope to do a show later this week with Craig Eagles on the FDS Podcast Network on Facebook Live about. We're going to actually pick our team. If we're Seattle, if we're the general manager, who would we take from each team? So that should be some fun. Also going to cover the draft, talk about that. Obviously, some great players, and then we got free agency. So I'll come up with my list of best available free agents in the coming days. So, but right now these next 2 days are actually the slowest days in the sports calendar of the year. Today there was some tennis this morning, but there's no live sports this evening. Somebody can say the home run derby is a live sport. I do not consider that. I do not watch All-Star games or any of that crap. It's not for me. I get it. Maybe some fans really like it because it's once a year and it's a spectacle, but the All-Star game, the shootout, anything that's gimmicky, that's just not me. I don't like gimmicky movies. I like Quentin Tarantino. I like Martin Scorsese. Give me the good stuff. Forrest Gump, Titanic, James Cameron films, Avatar, all that crap can go away. I like the real deal, the real deal Holyfield, so to speak. It's a pause in the sports calendar, although this weekend it was quite busy, like I mentioned, with a bunch of sports that I do talk about here on To The Point. Get tennis. I even watched soccer yesterday. Golf. We're just 3 days away from the Open Championship, which is turning into a bit of a just a tire fire because everybody's dropping out. We have people with COVID. We have some passport issues. We have injuries. So 13 players have already pulled out of the Open Championships in England. So cause for concern there. But you still got some really good names in the tournament. Hideki Matsuyama, the winner of the Masters, has pulled out. So it's unfortunate for him after having the biggest breakthrough of his career. But you're going to see U.S. Open champion from just three weeks ago, Jon Rahm, is at the tournament. Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, the usual suspects, if you will, Rory McIlroy. So it should make for the last major of the season. It should be fantastic, and I can't wait for that to start on Thursday, where the weather at the Open, you never know what you're going to get. You can get rain, you can get hail. It can always change. So it's always fun to watch as well, to see what kind of weather and who can adjust and handle that the best as the course kind of takes a beating over the course of 4 days. But today, to start the show, I was going to maybe lead with UFC, potentially with the Game 3 of the NBA Finals last night. But when you get breaking news 15 minutes before you go live, you got to talk about it. And breaking news in the hockey world, longtime Blackhawks defenseman, one of the best players in franchise history, former Norris Trophy winner, winning a Conn Smythe, Duncan Keith, has been flipped from the Chicago Blackhawks to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for a third-round draft pick and defenseman Caleb Jones. And I'm going to break down this trade, but just looking at it, it's been an ether for a while. Keith has been working with Chicago. They've actually been working with him to find a trade destination. The preferable destinations have been Western Canada, where he's from, be close to his family, or potentially Seattle, which is right on the border of Canada. So that would be an easy transition, easy travel for Duncan Keith. But we see that it gets done. He's an Edmonton Oiler. And just looking at it at the surface for the Edmonton Oilers, I like this trade. Now, is Duncan Keith what he used to be? No. But the Edmonton Oilers know that when they make the trade. The thing they're doing in this deal that a lot of bad organizations do is you trade for a defenseman who had prime success. I mentioned a Norris Trophy, a Conn Smythe, but you trade for that guy late in his career and expect him to be that. I can think of two organizations that pop into mind that have done this over the years. The Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens love doing this. And what they do is they bring home homegrown talent. And I mean, people from the Toronto area, from the Montreal area, and expect them to be superstars when they're well past their prime. Toronto brought back Wendell Clark twice. The first time Wendell was there, he was great. The second time around, I don't know what the hell they were doing. Joe Thornton this past year, Wayne Simmons, who they bring back, but they've done it forever. And it's like a feel-good story. Oh, we brought back a hometown kid. Well, that doesn't, okay, can he play? The two effort, Joe Thornton, Wayne Simmons couldn't play last year. So the feel-good story turns into a disaster pretty damn quick because you see the guy on the ice and you're like, well, that's not who we acquired, is it? That's who we have? That's our hometown guy that we have to root for? No, we have to boo him because he can't skate 2 strides. But Edmonton is acquiring Keith, where who does Edmonton have above him? Darnell Nurse. He's got a year left on his deal, but it's a big year for him to prove what he did last year is not just a flash in the pan, not a Morgan Riley, not a Sammy Girard, if you will. I think he's been propped up. He's a Colorado defenseman. He's been propped up a lot. If you watch him in the playoffs, he basically became unplayable. But I think of guys who are said to be number one defensemen, and they're not. There's only a few number one defensemen in this league, in the NHL. And I honestly believe that. I'll take a day and go through every team and go through it because there's not that many number one defensemen. They're rare. You get one, you hang on to it. You do not let it go. And, like Thomas Chabot, I think a lot of people think he's a number one defenseman. I don't think he's proven that he is yet. Okay. He can be a number one defenseman on a really bad team. To me, you got to be a number one defenseman on a good team. To me, him playing 30 minutes a night doesn't mean anything because Ottawa loses 3 out of 4 nights. So to me, he's not a number one defenseman. Looking around the league right now, Chicago doesn't have one. They don't have a number one defenseman. Colorado, Cale Makar, I think he's real close if he's not a number one defenseman. Like even this year's Norris Trophy winner, Adam Fox. You can't say he's a number one defenseman yet. Because guys get nominated for the Norris, they have one great year. You need to see a sample size. Victor Hedman has been nominated for 5 straight Norrises. That's a number one defenseman. That's a horse you throw in the back end, and he's going to get the job done. He's a number one guy. You can't say that. No, I don't think you can say that at Edmonton yet. I love Darnell Nurse. As a player, I love his spunk. I love that he'll fight anybody. He's physical. He can play 25 minutes a night, and it's not playing a guy 25 minutes a night. And you're like, why the hell are they playing this guy so much? He can handle it. But next year's big because can he be that number one guy? But you hope he can. I think he will. I have a lot of faith in him. So you got Darnell Nurse in front of Duncan Keith. You also have Oscar Klefbom, who missed all of last season. So it's a question mark. Can he hold up physically? How's he going to come back from this? Shoulder surgery, not easy to come back from. So how does he adapt? But prior to this year, Klefbom was regarded as the guy who could potentially be the number one defenseman of the future, not Darnell Nurse. So in a perfect world, Edmonton can get a little Vegas Golden Knight action going where you got Pietrangelo, you got Shea Theodore, you got 2 horses. Klefbom comes back healthy, you're in good shape. Then there's the Tyson Barrie of the world. Does he return to Edmonton? He had all kinds of success there, playing on that power play, being comfortable in his position, where in Toronto, I don't think that was his fault. I don't think that was management's fault. It was just a bad marriage. And that happens. We see players, they leave a situation, they get to another one, and it's just comfortable for them. Look at Taylor Hall. Arizona, Buffalo, it was not a fit. He was the number one guy. He's not a number one guy. He's not your top line winger. And that's okay. But don't force feed a guy that role and then bury him. In Boston, he was on the second line with Krejci, and it worked very well. That That's important. So for Barry, if I'm him, I want to return to Edmonton. I get he'll want a payday, but if you want to have a career that's successful, pick the right spot. Stay where you've had success. You're going to be in a power play with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. You can make an argument they're the two best players in the NHL during the regular season anyway. And that's called racking up points. You're going to get easy points on the power play, and he's an offensive-minded guy 5-on-5. So that's 3 guys. Then you get to Duncan Keith, the trade chip today. He's your number 4. That is perfect because he's an older guy. He's got a lot of wear on those tires, but he can still play. But as your number 4, he's there behind 3 guys that are clearly better than him. And there's no way in hell that management will ever think that, okay, well, these guys are better than Duncan Keith's better than these 3 guys. And if it is, then you got a bigger issue. You're going to miss the playoffs and you're up shit creek. But to be your 4th guy, and his play on the ice will still be good. He can make a great first pass. He still has good offensive instincts. He's not going to put up great points, but that's not what he's there for. What's he there for? Leadership intangibles. Now, leadership and intangibles is a word thrown around when it's like, what does this guy bring to the table? He's got great intangibles. He's a winner. And there's value in that. And I think Duncan Keith can really add that to this team. You look around. Connor McDavid's an exceptional talent, as is Leon Draisaitl, as is Darnell Nurse. But what have they won? They haven't. They made it to a second round. They lost in Game 7 to the Anaheim Ducks. That's what Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Darnell Nurse, the core of this team, that's how far they've gotten. But you're adding a player who's not only won, was not a bit piece on the team that he won. He was the horse of the team. He was a Conn Smythe Trophy winner. He knows exactly what it takes to win. And I think it's going to help Connor Draisaitl just to have another voice in the room that's tasted success, that knows what it takes to get over that mountain. And he's not going to be the captain, but he's going to be the silent leader of this team, because if somebody questions the process, he can say, shut up. I've done it. We did it in Chicago. We won 3 cups in 5 seasons. Did you? No. None of you guys have. I did it. And he's not the type of player, as he's aging, that playing 20 minutes a night, 18 minutes a night is going to affect him. He's not an ego-minded player. He was in Chicago where Joel Quenneville had a system where it was everybody love everybody, basically, to use the Flint Tropics reference. It was not about, well, Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane are way better than Andrew Shaw and Brian Bickle. No, it was about, we need a team to win this. And you're going to need a game where Duncan Keith can be a hero. You're going to need a game for the Tampa Bay Lightning where Ross Colton, a 4th-round draft pick, scores a big goal. You're going to need a game where Yanni Gordon, undrafted free agent, scores a shorthanded game winner in Game 7. And it just adds more confidence. It adds another leader to that room. And does it mean that they're going to win guaranteed success? No. But it doesn't hurt. And I think adding a guy who is not just a bit piece on the team, but adding a guy who was the main driver of that team's success is different. And I think it's better off for the organization. So I like the move. Obviously, you still got to pay his salary, but you get a player that can help you right now. Caleb Jones is a prospect, and we'll get to him in a second on the Chicago side of this deal. But Edmonton is not in the position right now where developing prospects is their top priority. The Edmonton Oilers and the Toronto Maple Leafs are so similar because they got high elite talent, regular season talent, and neither team has taken steps to get, they haven't got any better in the postseason. Now, I think the Leafs have a better roster, but this is Edmonton taking another step into adding to their roster. What did Toronto do last year, even though they failed in the playoffs? What they really improved on? Their defensive play. Their top 4 defense have been better than in the last decade in Toronto. Last year in Edmonton, it was one of their weakest points of their team. You could say the bottom 6 forwards. I still think they need to add a player to that bottom 6, at least 1, possibly 2. But improving that defense core where Evan Bouchard should not be playing. He's not an NHL player yet. I don't know if he ever will be, but he's not right now. Caleb Jones is not. Adding youngsters, having a veteran is better. If you got to play a youngster on that bottom pair, like the Leafs did with Rasmus Sandin, then you live with that. That's the breaks. That's the cap era. You need to do that sometimes. But I like this move for Edmonton. We'll see how it plays out in other moves they make in free agency. But I think this is a smart play by Kenny Holland and the Edmonton Oilers brass. Now on the other side of this deal, Chicago is in a state of transition where I mentioned they won 3 cups from 2010 to 2015. They won 3 Stanley Cups. And since then, they've only made the playoffs once, but they have not won a playoff game since they won their Stanley Cup in 2015. Made the playoffs in 2016, were swept by the Nashville Predators. So they've been in a rut for a while now. Hasn't been good in Chicago. They still have Patrick Kane. Jonathan Toews missed all of this year with an immune deficiency problem. I hope he can come back. He's one of my favorite players that I've ever seen play. I had such a respect for him, and I just hope he can be healthy. That's the most important thing to me when it comes to Chicago. But they get a 3rd-round pick. So you stockpile another draft pick. They've done well drafting lately. You look at Adam Boquist. You look at Kirby Dach. Both players look quite promising. So they know what to do with their draft picks. So that's a check, another draft pick. But you get Caleb Jones. And he's a prospect. He's a guy who I think he's got some offensive upside. So that's a nice addition. Potentially could be in your top 6 defense, especially with the team that's not projected to be very good. So you get a guy to kind of look at, similar to Eric Brandstrom in Ottawa, where it's a year where you take a look at the player, you say, is this guy part of our future? And you can make that evaluation over 82 games. But the more intriguing part of this is, Chicago wants to acquire Caleb Jones. Now, you're saying Edmonton, Evan Bouchard was the higher draft pick. Maybe we'd part with him if we really wanted to get Duncan Keith. Maybe we make other arrangements. No, Chicago wants Caleb Jones. Now, Caleb Jones is the brother of Seth Jones, of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And it's been reported that Seth Jones has requested a trade out of Columbus. He's got a year left on his deal. He's told Jarmo Kekalainen and John Davidson that he will not return. He will not re-sign with the team. So basically the team's in a position where they're terrible. They're tanking. They're drafting high, but they've lost Artemi Panarin for nothing. They lost Sergei Bobrovsky for nothing. They've lost Matt Duchene for nothing in the past number of years. And do you want to miss out on getting something for a Seth Jones, for a Zach Werenski, who are both unrestricted free agents in the summer of 2022? So it's a tough position because everybody's leaving Columbus. It's a bad stain in the organization right now. But you look at it. Chicago acquires Caleb Jones, and it's for one reason. They are trying to lure Seth to Chicago. Now, he does not have a no move, but if you're Chicago, if you're Columbus, you're going to get more in return for Seth Jones if you can set up a deal where you can get a sign and trade. So after Seth Jones is traded to the Chicago Blackhawks, Seth Jones signs a deal right away, 7-year extension. That would give Columbus more value because then you're at least throwing another pick in the deal, potentially another prospect. Because just a trade with uncertainty, you're not going to get as much in the open market for a guy like that just for 1 year, where Chicago, still with Seth Jones next season, will not be projected to be that good. But if Seth wants to play with his brother, which I can't see why not, we've seen the history of the league, brothers like to stick together. Maybe other than the Kachucks because they like to battle against each other, but the Sedins love to play with each other. You know, the Hall's obviously playing with his dad. There's a connection there where siblings, if they can get together, the Stahl family, of course, Sutters, if you can get together, you normally do it. And for Chicago, it's an original 16. For hearing players interviewed over the year, it's a fantastic city. I've never been, but I've only heard good things. And, you know, Seth Jones is American, so it's not like a Canadian organization would really appeal to him more than, you know, playing in Chicago would have just as much appeal, in my opinion, to Seth Jones as the Toronto Maple Leafs, just as, you know, both original 6 franchises. Chicago, he's an American. He has no love for Toronto. I'm not saying he does for Chicago, but it's an original 6 team. It's in the United States. That's where he's from. He's not a Canadian. So going across the border, I don't think would be that. I don't think that's high on his bucket list. So does this guarantee you Seth Jones? No, but it doesn't hurt. It gives you a start. If you're Stan Bowman, you say, you know, Yarmo, well, Caleb's down here. He really wants to play with Seth. And, you know, they've been, obviously they're brothers. They're chatting. Let's get something done here. I want to have Seth Jones on my roster by training camp. And I can't see Columbus going this summer without trading Seth Jones. It would just make no sense to me to start the year with Seth and then you move him at the deadline or something. Get him this summer, have him gone. You can't have that cancer all year either hanging over Columbus again, where it's, well, this guy wants out. Werenski's got 1 year on his deal left, and he reportedly really wants to go to the Rangers. Just seems like everybody wants to go to the Rangers, but he wants to go to the Rangers. And Seth Jones is sitting here waiting, and it's not go. He's playing well, but we know he's leaving, so it's kind of a tease. You know, Seth Jones had a pretty bad season last year, but everybody in Columbus did. It was just a tire fire from the beginning. Korpisalo, Merzlikins, the goaltending situation was bad. They traded David Savard. Their captain, Nick Foligno, was moved. So they really wore down that roster that had some playoff success. But for Seth Jones, I think Chicago's become even more appealing, if it wasn't appealing enough already. And now it's kind of a holding pattern where can another team get in a position to acquire him and make a better deal where you acquire him for the season, but it's not just a rental. If you're trading for Seth Jones, you want him long-term. To me, Seth Jones is the second best defenseman in the NHL. I think Hedman's, you know, way up here, but Jones is not that far off. I think he's got all the talent in the world. He's another big defenseman. He can play 30 minutes a night. He's a number one guy. And he's played really well with Werenski over the years. And he's going to have to find a new partnership. Say if he went to Chicago, Chicago would likely have to part with a Kirby Dach or a high-end prospect for sure, because you're not getting nothing if you're Columbus for Seth Jones. He's the best player you've had since Rick Nash. So what can you get for him? And I think you can get quite a bit, because it's not every day that a player of his ilk becomes available, because wherever he signs, it will be for 7 years and it will be for a lot of money. You can bet your ass on that. So does Chicago try to get out of deals with Patrick Kane, with Jonathan Taves, who do have no moves, but do they ask them to waive them so that Seth Jones is going to want $9 to $11 million. Kane and Taves make 10.5 right now. We see what teams are doing when you're paying guys more than a few guys over $10 million a year. It doesn't work. Teams don't have playoff success doing that. Only one player in the history of the NHL has won a playoff series making over $10 million. That's Carey Price. He won 3 this year. But, you know, players that make excess of $10 million will start winning playoff series because it's just inevitable. The cap goes up. You see things happening. But as of right now, it's not. And for Chicago to have that many guys, and Taves is health uncertainties, Kane's still an elite player. I don't think if you're Chicago, if you acquire Seth Jones, you do not want to part with Patrick Kane, because they're both Americans. They're going to be on the Olympic team. I think you want Kane as a mentor to Seth, even though he's been in the league for a while. And you have your stud offensive player and Patrick Kane, who's the best American-born player in the history of the game, in my opinion. And you have Seth Jones, who has the potential to be the best American-born defenseman of all time as well. He's got every intangible, every attribute that you'd want to have success as a defenseman in the NHL. So where will Seth Jones go? Who knows? That'll be a story. Free agent frenzy, trades that happen that day, things percolating all summer into the fall. That'll be a story. And now that Caleb Jones is there, the rumors will only continue to swirl about Seth Jones potentially landing in Chicago with his brother, where Jeremy Colleton and Stan Bowman will try to resurrect that team and get it back into the glory days of the early 2010s, where between them and LA, they could not be stopped. It was just back every year. It was a battle to get to the final. And when you got there, you played a team from the East that was just far inferior to you, and you disposed of them rather easily. So that's the big news headline today of seeing Seth Jones getting Caleb Jones getting traded to the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for Duncan Keith, who's now an Edmonton Oiler. So good move, I think, from both teams. Obviously, Chicago, it's more of a gamble, but the worst case, you get a prospect that you can develop, and you see what he can do, if he can grow in a situation where he'll likely get more ice time and more opportunities potentially on the power play in Chicago. So that's the big news today. Over the weekend, I mentioned, just some sports that we don't talk about every day, but let's start with Wimbledon. And it was a big weekend in England because you had the two Wimbledon finals. You had the Euro 2020 final yesterday at Wembley Stadium in London. But over the weekend, it was the Wimbledon final. And the women's match was good, but the main headliner is the dominance of 2021 for Novak Djokovic. Djokovic defeated Matteo Berrettini yesterday, 6-7, 6-4, 6-4, 6-3, capturing his 20th major title, tying him with Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal for the most majors in the history of the sport for a man. And it's incredible because he's won the first three majors of this season. And just wow. He had 17. I thought at the start of the year, he'll probably win Australia, he'll get 18, maybe Wimbledon. But, Nadal or somebody else will find a way to win a major in there. But it's just been Djokovic the whole year. He beat Nadal at the French Open, where that's Nadal's favorite location. And it's where he's got 13 of his 20 majors. He's the king of clay. Djokovic beats him there in the semifinal, comes back from 2 sets down and gets Tsitsipas to win in that final. Then you go to Wimbledon. He loses a set in the first round, does not lose a set until the championship game, fights through against Denis Shapovalov, where the Canadian gave him all that he could handle, 7-6, 7-5, 7-5, where you can make an argument that Denis played better, but Novak just finds a way to win the big points, get a break when he needs one. And yesterday, it was up 5-1 in the first set, but Berrettini comes back, wins the first set. It kind of looks like, okay, we'll have a competitive match. But Djokovic he doesn't get flustered from losing a set. He's confident against anybody in the world, which he should be, because he's the best in the world right now. And he just cruises the next couple of sets to his 20th major, his 6th Wimbledon title, and now he's 2 behind Roger for the most titles ever at Wimbledon, which at the age of 34 is still very much in reach because he is not slowing down. And looking forward, obviously you have one major left this season, which he would be the betting favorite to win, in Flushing Meadows at the US Open in late August, early September. But there's also the Olympics, and he's going to the Olympics representing Serbia. And what a year it would be if he won all 4 Grand Slams and Olympic gold at the Olympics. That year is the greatest year of almost any sport, of any athlete ever, because you're playing. It's not just like an Olympic sport where you only go for every 4 years and you're Penny Oleksiak and you're a great swimmer, and then people love you for 2 weeks and then they forget you exist. Tennis is on a stage. They play every week. They're like golf, and you're always in the news. So You got Novak coming in winning 3 majors in the spotlight already, and he's going to go play for Serbia and compete and see what he can do. And again, I'd be shocked if he doesn't win the gold medal at the Olympics. He'll go to Tokyo. The only thing I could see him getting flustered about is COVID protocol. He's a guy who's struggled. He's kind of been a guy who said COVID doesn't exist from the beginning. He's complained constantly about COVID rules throughout this year. He's had temper tantrums about it, saying there's too much. And, the Olympics came out and said that there's going to be no spectators because in Tokyo right now, it's the worst wave they've seen since the pandemic started. Everywhere else in the world seems to be getting better, but Tokyo. So there's going to be pretty strict rules, even though the Olympic Village is what it is. It's still going to be a party, I believe, and some chaos. But I'm sure there's going to be rules where Novak has to follow them. And as a anti-vaxxer, as a person who's against it, that can be frustrating. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've gotten vaccinated, but yet I still get pissed off with some of the rules around the world when it comes to pro sports and the athletes. Athletes should not be following the same rules as everybody else. And the reason I say that is because athletes aren't like us, okay? They're different. It's just a different life. It's going to sound bad, but they're more important than me or you or anybody else, because sports is something that's integral to society. Yes, going to work for any of us is so important, but just because you're playing a sport and you're playing against other people doesn't mean you should have to quarantine or you can't go to a restaurant or something. That wasn't our life. We go to work every day. You can go to a restaurant now. Why shouldn't that be the same thing in Tokyo? And if you can play your sport without touching another person with distance, especially with tennis, you should be able to, and you get COVID, you should be able to play because you're not touching the other player. You're not in contact with anybody else. Now, I know that's probably an unpopular opinion. I've said that before, but I just think the rules at this point, with the amount of COVID cases you see every day in Tokyo, they shouldn't be having the Olympics. If it's really about health and safety, which we all know it isn't, the reason they're having the Olympics is a television contract. And NBC and the partners are going to want to make some money. And that's the reason they're having them. But putting restrictions on these athletes, I think, is a joke. You got to let people live at this point. It's been 18 months. People are sick of it. I'm not just going to speak for me. I know there's more people out there that are like me that are just like, can we just get on with this, please? Like, life you can't be stuck in quicksand forever. But I see that as the only roadblock for Novak Djokovic, where if there is strict guidelines, which there'll be stricter guidelines than I would ever draw up because people care about safety more than me. So does he follow those? Does he get in trouble? Does he test positive for COVID? Wouldn't that be an ironic story if this guy, he's already had COVID, but we've seen you can get it again or whatever the hell happens. Your immune, you can get it a second time. So if he gets it again, he's out of the tournament. That's how it's going to work. They're not going to take my idea because they want to still have the illusion that all these sporting events, the Olympics, whatever, the pissing contest around the world, that it's all about safety and guidelines and what we believe is best for, yada, 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 bullshit. But that's what they want us to believe. So that's what will be portrayed to all of us. So if a Novak Djokovic, who to my knowledge has not been vaccinated because he was against it, didn't believe it even existed, I don't believe he's vaccinated. So he's over there, he tests positive for COVID. You're not going to hear me feel sorry for him because he's not my favorite athlete anyway. But, for all his fans, I know a couple, I know one for sure that's pretty close to me. I hope I don't hear the excuse, well, COVID did it to him. He didn't have this great year. He could have got vaccinated. So I hope the best for him, but there's always that risk. And the COVID police, AKA the Karens and the Moon Mist crowd of the world, would never let you play with it. So buyer beware. But, a great tournament for him. Again, only lost 2 sets the entire tournament, playing some fantastic hockey, some fantastic tennis, just systematically decimating opponents. It was Tsitsipas at um, at the French. It's Berrettini here. We see guys break through, get to a final. It's a big accomplishment, but you're running into Djokovic. Shapovalov got a big bump because he had a tight match with Novak. He didn't take a set, but it was almost like a victory because it was 7-6, 7-5, 7-5. A tie break, and then he gets broke once each set. So it looks like, well, at least I was competitive in the match today. But it's, again, for guys like Shapovalov, like Berrettini, Tsitsipas, Sasha Zverev, you got to break through. And it's not easier said than done, but getting to a final means nothing in these sports. You need to win. It's about winning majors. And for these young guys, Novak's 34. He doesn't look to be getting any worse. He's got 20 majors now. He knows his next one, he'll be the all-time leader. And at his pace and the way he's playing, it wouldn't surprise me if he finishes his career with 25 to 27 majors. Because he's, like I said, he's 34. He's going to keep playing. He's in the best shape of anybody in tennis. So why would he slow down? Father Time isn't knocking at that door yet, and he's not a guy that gets injured like a Federer, like a Nadal. He plays a lot, but he knows when he gets his downtime. He plays in the tournaments he has to, and he goes to the majors and he kicks ass. So congrats to Djokovic. When he was early in his career, I never thought he would be at this point, because he was always the guy that Federer and Nadal would get in their draw and be like, oh, great, we got Novak in the semi. We'll dispose of him in 4 sets. He's gone early, but he just changed parts of his game where he wasn't just winning one out of every 8 to 10 majors. He started to become dominant, and he'll go down as the greatest tennis player ever. I think for some people, or the best male tennis player ever. I don't think he can surpass Serena Williams, if you ask me. But some people will say that Roger Federer is the best male tennis player ever, just because he's the nostalgia, and Federer's well liked, unlike Nadal, unlike Djokovic, who, is, I think most people see him as kind of an asshole, which, that's fine. I don't think he gives great pressers. I think he's kind of a diva, but I can't argue with winning. That's what we talk about here. Winners find a way to win. Losers find a way to lose. This guy was having a mediocre to loser-ish career. He made changes, systematic changes to his game, to his health regimen, and it's helped him become the greatest champion in the history of tennis. So just proves talent is one thing, but the work ethic that you put into that talent will eventually put you over the top if you have that drive and you're willing to do it day in, day out. In the women's side of the draw, world number 1, Ash Barty, captured her first Wimbledon title in her second major, defeating Carolina Pliskova 6-3, 6-7, 6-3. The way this match started, it looked like Barty was just going to clean Pliskova, just make the match and win the match in under an hour, where she was up 4-0 early, won the first 17 points of this match. Pliskova dropped her first 3 service games, but Barty came down to earth. Pliskova started raising her game, but again, it looked like a 2-set match where Barty broke Pliskova at 5-all, so she was serving for the set at 6-5 in the second set. She gets broken in love. They go to a tiebreak. Pliskova ends up winning the tiebreak, but she settled down, found control of her game early in the third set, broke Pliskova in the first service game of the third set, and from there just cruised to a victory where she never dropped serve again. She was calm, confident, and Barty's having a great season, but she gets to the 4th round at Roland Garros. She gets disposed. She gets disposed in the 3rd round at the Aussie, even though she's won a couple Master 1000 events. But this week, it was just, she played some great tennis all week. She beat the French Open champion Barbara Krejcikova in the 4th round. She beats her fellow Aussie Anna Tomljanovic in the quarter. She beats Kerber in the semifinal. So she's faced some tough competition, but she never broke. She just kept playing her game. And for Ash Barty, You keep your number one ranking, you get your second major, and she's a good player. You know, women's tennis is wide open. You think of the best in the game. You got Osaka, who's on a break right now due to mental health, but should be at the Olympics. Simona Halep has barely played all year because she's injured. She's had surgery. She's now tied with Barty for majors. Osaka's got 4. Serena obviously isn't what she used to be. She's on her way to retirement. Kerber's got 3. So Barty, it's still wide open in women's tennis, where Carolina Pliskova was in her second major final, or first since 2016, and both were not great matches for her. She was really got her clock cleaned in 2016. But in this match, it was over in the third set early, and she never found a way to put pressure on Ash Barty. And for Pliskova, it's got to be frustrating because she's a good player. She's been in the top 10 for years, but she can't break through that ceiling where unnamed players like Yelena Ostapenko, Barbara Krejcikova, who are unranked, find ways to win a major. But she can't. You know, she's had all the talent, and getting to semifinals at times, only getting to one final before Wimbledon, is really just a career where she's going to look back and say, what could have been? I should have been better. But she's too inconsistent at the majors where she doesn't play great tennis. And obviously she'll move on to the US Open, but this one's got to hurt. She started off the match completely flat, and she lost the first set, 5 minutes into the match, where she was Barty held at love. Then Pliskova was broken at love to the first 8 points of the match. And she fought back in the second, but you lose a set before you even know it. The set's over at 4-love. She ended up being 6-3, but it was over. And now it's a moving on point. Barty will keep being the world number one, but a good week for her where she played some great tennis. Pliskova gets to a final, but again, cannot get over the top and loses. So following the Djokovic-Berrettini final, which went 4 sets, in the afternoon, so you get the celebration. Wimbledon's over after missing it last year for the first time since World War II because of the COVID-19 pandemic. You get the Euro 2020 final, which featured Italy and the host team, England. And England has not won a championship as a country since 1966. So they're even worse than the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have not won one since 1967 when it comes to winning championships. And this year they get a favorable draw. They beat the Czech Republic. They beat Denmark. Not exactly teams that you expect to see in Euro 2020 get deep into the tournament. They avoid the likes of France, Portugal, Spain. So on the other end, Italy, they beat Spain, and they get through again. So they've been one of the more impressive teams in the tournament. Now, I'm not the biggest soccer guy, but this was electric. You're at Wembley Stadium. There's about 60-odd thousand people there, drunk, just having a good time. You see images of people outside the stadium trying to get in, where police officers had to detain them, and it was quite a scene. But they love their soccer in Europe. And it turns out England strikes first early in the match. Italy responds at the 67th minute. But then they go through extra time, the whole deal. And that brings us to penalty kicks, which is essentially a shootout or a gimmick. And again, I hate that this is the way it was decided. No game should be decided by, especially a final, should be decided by a gimmick. I'd rather, obviously this is a final, so you play till somebody wins, but I would rather see a game end in a tie. I think that's something that the NHL should look into. I'd rather see a tie at the end of the game than it go to a shootout. I don't watch shootouts. I switch the channel. That's just something it's not hockey to me. A skills competition is not hockey, because there's tons of players. Pat Maroon is not exactly the most skilled player in the world, yet he's won 3 cups in a row. So that a shootout does not tell me anything but how good a team is. It just tells me, okay, we have a little more talent than the guys over there. So it's irrelevant. It's not important. It's not essential to the game. But we go to penalties, and the Italians end up coming out on top, winning 3-2 in penalty kicks, and England's drought continues. Obviously, a great tournament for them. They haven't been to a final in a very long time, but the pain of losing this one where you had a great draw, you had a lead early in the game, but the Italians find a way to squeak it out. Obviously, around the world, you see the Italian faithful. I saw videos of Toronto where, in Little Italy, people are going nuts. In Ottawa, Italians all over the world. And soccer is a big sport, or football, as they call it, across the pond, is huge. And, this game was bet on more than the Super Bowl last year. That's how big this event was, the Euros. And whenever countries are battling each other like the World Cup, it becomes a spectacle. It takes over the sports world. And I gotta say, I like the Euros. I like the World Cup. I'm not going to watch a whole lot of soccer when there's other sports on, but I watched pretty much that whole game yesterday. I enjoyed it. And, I hate the diving and all of that and that crap, the whining. But, you gotta really appreciate what those guys do when it comes to their cardio training and being able to play that long in the heat and, just a crowd going nuts around you. So congratulations to Italy. Obviously a painful loss for England, who look to rebound, maybe have a strong World Cup next year in Qatar. But we'll see. But interesting development where we'll see where this goes. But also a great tournament obviously got canceled because of the pandemic. So it's also positive that you see this tournament get finished. You see Wimbledon being completed. You're seeing the Open Championship this week. Athletes are starting to travel across the world. Right now the NFL is projected to have games in London next year. The Jaguars always play. There's always a number of games also that come over and they play in London. So that's supposed to happen. That's just life. People are starting to travel. It's not a weird thing anymore. That's how it should be. But good to see the world enjoy it. And I was happy to watch some soccer as well and kind of take it all in. Like I said, it's the MLB All-Star break. So we're at the All-Star game. You say it's a halfway point of the season where you're seeing who are the pretenders, who are the contenders at this point. Wednesday, I'll be doing a podcast with Casey Ward where we kind of go through the divisions, talk about the best teams, who our MVP favorite is at this point, who's kind of been a disappointing team, things of that nature. So Wednesday, we'll dive into that. But looking at it right now, first in the AL East, the Boston Red Sox. That's a surprise. Boston was, most people had the Toronto Blue Jays finishing ahead of the Boston Red Sox this season. And, for good reason. Boston was terrible last year. They traded away Mookie Betts. Their pitching is not exactly spectacular, but they get Alex Verdugo, Rafael Devers starting to hit the ball well. But again, JD Martinez is crushing homers. Xander Bogaerts is an all-star. And, they get Nathan Eovaldi is pitching pretty consistent. Eduardo Rodriguez is not very good, but they just find ways to win. And they're 9 games up on the Toronto Blue Jays at the All-Star break at this point. They're 8 up on the New York Yankees, who are the favorite to win the division and, are third in the division at this point and just barely there after they take 2 or 3 from the Houston Astros, but get walked off yesterday by Jose Altuve. So that's a surprise. The Red Sox they're a game and a half above the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays have won 6 of their past 7, so they're starting to play better baseball again. But they're going through a tough spurt where they're obviously Tyler Glasnow goes down with an injury. Their pitching is a little inconsistent. Their bats are, you still look at their lineup hitting wise, and you're like, how does this team win? But they find ways to do it. G-Man Choi, Kevin Kiermaier, Taylor Walls. They call guys up and they plug and play. And it's worked forever, and it continues to, being only a game and a half back of first place in the American League East. Brings us to American League Central, where the Chicago White Sox, who are projected to have a really good season, they are 8 games clear of the Cleveland Indians, who were in it for a while. They had a tough stretch before the All-Star break. The White Sox played the Orioles, which doesn't hurt them. You see great years from Tim Anderson, who's an All-Star for the first time. Jose Abreu, last year's MVP. Not having the same exact season, but driving in a lot of runs. Lucas Giolito, you got some good pitching depth there for the White Sox, and they look like a team that can contend in the American League East, in the American League, where there's not one team where you look at them and say, they're a favorite. Houston, they have a 3.5 game lead. They were in second for most of the start of the season, but lately they played the Oakland Athletics a lot, and they've been winning against them head to head. And you see their team. Altuve is an all-star. Correa is an all-star. Bregman's having a solid season. They're having the guys who were torched from fans and the media for good reason for cheating during this 2017 run are playing well without cheating. We knew that already. It's like Barry Bonds. The guy was a great hitter before he took steroids, but then he started taking steroids and he's hitting 70 home runs. He didn't need to take steroids, but he did. So Houston's 3.5 up. The Oakland Athletics are still a very good team. They're 20 games above 500, but they're 3.5 games back at Houston. So that tells you just how much dominance Houston's had this season. Zach Greinke's been pretty solid pitching. Cesar Valdez, they still have a staff that's, Verlander's out for the year and they're still playing great ball. So they're great, but their all-stars and Correa and Altuve have said that they're going to boycott the All-Star game because of, I think the way they've been treated, which is ridiculous to me because they did cheat and they need to face the music. I think they should go and hear the boos and just like they do in every other park, but that's their decision. But I think it's the wrong one. But Houston's 3.5 up on Oakland. You got Seattle, who's far back, but no big surprise. But I thought Oakland would be real close. I thought it'd be like within a game. Now you got pivoting to the National League. You got the Mets. This division is so interesting because no team has been that great. You look at the Mets, they're in first place by 3.5 games. Francisco Lindor, the big offseason addition, has been rather disappointing. He's only got 10 home runs at the All-Star break. He's only batting .221. His on base isn't that great. He's a great fielder, but you thought his bat would be better. It would translate early into his new Mets tenure, but it really hasn't. You're seeing good players. Pete Alonso started to feel it. Jeff McNeil is consistent. They have the best pitcher in baseball, and Jake DeGrom, who has an ERA of 1.110 at the All-Star break, which is second lowest in Major League Baseball history, just under Nolan Ryan. So pretty elite company. He's been dominant all season. They've gotten some really good work from Taijuan Walker, who was with the Blue Jays last year. They signed him. He's actually replacing an injured player, replacing Kershaw on the All-Star game list. So he's been that good for the Mets. But the Mets, they're a team. Conforto, they got Brandon Nimmo, so they've had a strong season. But again, it's not great. The Atlanta Braves are, to me, the most disappointing team in baseball, being 3.5 games back alongside the Phillies. Nationals are 4 back, but you got Freddie Freeman, who's had a tough start, kind of like Lindor. He's turned it up as of late, and that's led to some success. Ozzie Albies is going to the All-Star game, who's had a really good year. But terrible news on Saturday is one of the best young players in baseball, and Ronald Acuna Jr. tore his ACL trying to catch a ball in right field. He's out for the season, 9-month recovery. And that's such a huge blow to Atlanta, they were in the National League Championship game last year, National League Championship Series, losing to the Dodgers in 7 games after being up 3-1. But now you lose Acuna Jr., arguably your most important player. He bats lead off. So you got Freeman, you got Albies, but how are you going to fill that hole? The trade deadline, what are you going to do? So that really hurts this team. You look at below them, you got the Phillies. Well, you got Harper and you got JT Realmuto, but their pitching hasn't been that consistent. And Harper is hit and miss. And the Mets somehow sit in first place. So this division should get interesting because you got Atlanta, no Acuna. That's going to hurt them a lot. He gets on base a ton. He drives in runs. So that might push Atlanta out of the playoffs. Can the Phillies make some deadline moves? Could the Nationals potentially get interesting here? They still have Scherzer. They still have some good bats. Can they make a couple additions and make it interesting down the stretch for the New York Mets? National League Central, we have the Milwaukee Brewers, who they were on a great run, but they missed the playoffs last year in a surprising fashion. Christian Yelich was injured a lot. That hurt them. But you see this year, Brandon Workman has become an ace pitcher for them. He's just every day you need him. He's out every fifth day. He's pitching a gem. Yelich is back healthy. They've made some moves to get better. Their team is just a more solid team, and they continue to play at an elite level and get wins. So Milwaukee, they're up 4 games on, oddly enough, the Cincinnati Reds, who at the start of the year you had said, well, definitely it's going to be the Cubs or Cardinals battling with Milwaukee. The Cubs and Cardinals are terrible. The Cubs at one point lost 12 in a row and they finally won against the Phillies last week. But they're a disaster. They're now, do we trade Anthony Rizzo? Do we trade Chris Bryant, the 2 guys that really helped us win a World Series in 2016? That's on the table. It's gotten that bad in Chicago. So they're in a holding pattern now. St. Louis, pitching's been, other than Jack Flaherty, he's gotten injured, their pitching has been no good. The bats have been inconsistent. Arenado has been okay since trading for him, but he hasn't changed the world. Goldschmidt, again, good additions, but the rest of the lineup has been quiet. And again, their pitching, their bullpen gets blown up. So Milwaukee is a 4-game lead over Cincinnati, who I thought, well, they'll be a big seller at the deadline. They'll trade Sonny Gray. They'll trade Eugenio Suarez. They'll trade Castillo, but maybe not now. If they can keep it a race, they may decide to keep their parts and say, you know what, we'll battle with Milwaukee down the stretch here and see if we can make the playoffs. And finally, the biggest surprise of them all, I think even bigger than the Boston Red Sox, is at the All-Star break, the San Francisco Giants leading the National League West by 2 games. They lead the Dodgers by 2 games. They lead the Padres by 6 games for first in the National League West. They have the best record in baseball. And it's crazy that the Giants are doing this, because they still have a lot of the nucleus that won the World Series. They still have Brandon Crawford playing shortstop. They still have Buster Posey behind the plate. They still have Brandon Belt. But it's an older team, but they just find ways to win. Kevin Gausman has been a fantastic story for the San Francisco Giants. Pitched in Baltimore, bounced around the past couple of years, looked like he could be out of the game. He's got a 1.90 ERA at the All-Star break. He's been a stud. Alex Wood comes over from the Los Angeles Dodgers. He's given them really good innings. I mentioned you got like Austin Slater at the top of your lineup, Mike Yastrzemski, both sons of former major leaguers. They've been good for this team. They played well. So they're getting contributions from everybody. And you look at the Dodgers, who you think, well, they're going to cruise to a division title. And that makes a whole lot of sense. But they go through some injuries. Kershaw's been banged up. Cody Bellinger's having a terrible season. He's batting 180 at this point, and the power's not there. They got some problems there. Walker Buehler's been great, to nobody's surprise. But they've had some inconsistency. Trevor Bauer is out of the game right now because of allegations of sexual misconduct and inappropriate behavior. So he's gone. They were priced more back into the starting lineup. So they've been inconsistent. Like I said, they've had injuries, inconsistencies. And as of right now, the Dodgers and Padres make up the 2 wildcard spots in the National League. But you just look at the Giants, like their bullpen. Dominic Leone, who was with the Blue Jays for a number of years, he's pitched 18 innings this season. He's got an 0.98 ERA. Pretty fantastic. You got Tyler Rogers, who's pitched 43. He's got a 1.47 ERA, just dominant. Then you got Jake McGee, who's got a 2.72 as a closer, but he's been solid. He's been better lately and been a real solid source of confidence. The Dodgers had the big names. The Padres had the big names with Manny Machado, Eric Hosmer, and of course, Fernando Tatis Jr. III. But the San Francisco Giants they keep fighting. And head-to-head, the Dodgers are much better than them. But the biggest interest for me down the stretch will be, can they keep this up? Can the Giants potentially make the playoffs? Could they win this division? In every year, it's just, well, now the Padres are the biggest threat. Well, the Giants are the biggest hurdle right now for the Dodgers. They expect to get back to the World Series. They expect to win it again. Can the Giants win this division? Can they make them forced to play a wild card game where it's 1 game chips on the line? Anything can happen in that game. It can Especially it would be a lot of fun if that game was Dodgers Padres, because those two teams hate each other. They both have World Series aspirations. You'd likely see, I think it'd be interesting from the Dodgers. Do they start Clayton Kershaw? Do they start Walker Buehler? I would start Walker Buehler because I think he's a better pitcher right now, but you'd have pressure to start Kershaw because he is, regarded as one of the best pitchers of all time, where I think Buehler can win Cy Young here potentially this season. So obviously that's a long ways away. We still have multiple months to figure this out, August, September, the rest of July. But, we had the All-Star game tomorrow night. We get the home run derby tonight. Baseball is back Thursday, where the Red Sox and Yankees will play a standalone game on Thursday to get things going. But interest on the stretch, like I said, me and Casey are going to be doing a podcast later in the week and kind of recap everybody and what's going on and where we see things going in the future. NBA Finals, Milwaukee Bucks have won last night, 120-100, where it was at points it was dominance. They let Phoenix back into the game, and the biggest key to Milwaukee winning last night was getting center DeAndre Ayton in foul trouble, because he's the only guy that can really defend Giannis. He doesn't defend him well, but he's big. When he's out of the game, Torrey Craig or Jay Crowder end up guarding him in the paint, and it's just a man against boys. Where Giannis last night goes for 42 points. He went for 40 in game 2. He's been fantastic. And I think he's doing all this in the paint because he does not he's a terrible 3-point shooter, 18% for the playoffs, shooting below 50% for the playoffs from the free throw line, which is just pathetic. But in the paint, he's unstoppable. And obviously the big game is game 4. Milwaukee can send it back to Phoenix 2-2. That would be a ton of pressure on the Phoenix Suns. But we'll see what brings. Can they make an adjustment? What can they help Ayton out so he doesn't have to be put in a position to have a lot of fouls early in the game? And, game 4 Wednesday, game 5 Saturday. So we have a long break between games. It would be nice to have a game tomorrow night where there's no sports all week, but nevertheless, game 4 of that series will go Wednesday night from beautiful Milwaukee. No sports tonight. No sports tomorrow for me anyway. I'm not watching an All-Star game. Catch up on some Breaking Bad to recap with Shay tomorrow, which we'll do on the podcast. And hopefully line up some interviews coming up as well. Talk to some people in the sports world. And like I said, get the expansion draft going, preview the NHL draft, NBA free agency coming up. So still a lot happening. NFL opening training camps in under 3 weeks. So lots happening in the sports world, even though it's idle tonight. But get some sleep, catch up on the Z's and just listen to the podcast. And, that could be your sports for the night. Get your little fix listening to me rant on about Duncan Keith and what the Edmonton Oilers are doing well at this point in the offseason. But hope everybody had a great weekend. Or Monday, we're back at it. So expect a full list of pods this week. A lot more coming, a lot of good content. So everybody keep your eyes and ears out for that. As always, stay healthy, take care, and we'll talk soon.